Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Philadelphia-based jazz bassist Nicholas Krolak. We caught up with him in early April 2020 to talk about his new 2020 CD, Voice Equals Power. As a young veteran of the Philadelphia jazz scene, he has spent the last decade working as a sideman, experiencing new styles, and studying with the masters. Get to know him.
Thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
I think the one thing that I've been trying to do with these interviews is kind of break it up a little bit. I think it's going to be easier to talk about music and kind of, I don't know, just get out there and talk about what's going on and have a little oasis. So I did get your CD last night in the mail. I was very happy to get that. And usually, in most times, musicians are so busy, it's hard to catch up. During, obviously, the COVID-19 time, it's been a little bit easier. So talk to me about this brand new album and kind of how you feel about what you're putting out there for the people.
Oh, my new album is coming out. It's going to be my second album called Voice Equals Power. And it was recorded as a live concert at a local recording studio that does a live concert series. The name Voice Equals Power came from a particularly kind of dark period in my life where I wasn't really seeing the point of making music. I felt like I should be doing something else. I felt like I should be maybe with the amount of time I spent working on music, I could have been like a lawyer working at the ACLU, or I could have been an environmental scientist, trying to fight climate change or something like that. And it kind of came to me over a series of experiences that my artistic voice is my power. And I started writing a lot of work that explored sustainability issues, at least from my perspective, and I started to get more involved in having kind of like a mission behind the music, as opposed to just making music for music's sake.
Has Philadelphia been a lifelong home for you?
It has not. I'm originally from New Jersey, right across from Staten Island. I'm originally closer to New York, but I've been in Philadelphia for about 10 or so years now.
So talk to me a little bit about your childhood and how you got reared on jazz.
I didn't start playing jazz at all until I was about 19. I didn't really even know it existed, to be honest with you. My conception of jazz was smooth jazz, and I wasn't very into that. And I grew up listening to a lot of like punk rock and ska bands, and that was like the big thing when I was growing up. So I was very into that, and I didn't really start playing music till about high school. And I was just playing in bands with my friends, garage bands. And I think it was right after high school, a friend of mine had like a rockabilly band and wanted an upright bass. And so I got an upright bass and got a really, really old beat up bass, and I really enjoyed upright bass, and that kind of led to exploring other musics that had upright bass in it. And that's why I got hooked on jazz through, I found a copy of Bill Evans' Live at Montreux with Eddie Gomez and Jack DeJohnette, and that was it.
Right on.
I very, very enthusiastically and very naively was like, yeah, I could sound like Eddie Gomez, which I still have not been able to do, but.
Were your first gigs, when you started out, were you nervous? Was it a natural place for you to play live? How did that work for you?
I've never been nervous performing. Before I really got into music when I was in high school, I was a very, very high-level soccer player. And that's kind of where I thought my life was going. But that ended through some injuries, and that's around the time when I really started pursuing music, kind of late in high school. And so being a musician and being on stage just seemed like a natural thing to me. Being the center of people's attention, it's actually kind of easier, I think, than because there's nobody rooting against you. Like, nobody wants you to fail on stage. Whereas when you're playing a sport, the whole other team wants you to fail, and then half of the audience wants you to fail. So I feel very comfortable on stage. My first gigs, I was definitely more nervous because not so much about the stage, but just because I was very not ready. And I went to school at a very small liberal arts school in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania called Moravian College, with a very small jazz scene. So basically at the time it was like my teacher and me, and that was it. It was the only two bass players. So whenever he was out of town, like, it was just me. And so I was getting all kinds of gigs with very experienced players that I was not ready for at all, and which was a really great learning experience. It was really great to be just kind of thrown into situations that you're really not ready for. So I was a little more nervous about just doing a good job and playing with like my professors and stuff. But in terms of like stage fright or anything like that, I've never really experienced that very much.
So you also have a podcast where you interview jazz people. So talk to me a little bit about that and how that came about, how that works with you being a musician.
Yeah, well, it's also called Voice Equals Power podcast. And that came about, I took a lesson with the great saxophonist Tim Warfield, who I've known for a long time, but I never took a formal lesson. And I wanted to talk about composition and such, and we really quickly got into, all right, you wrote a song. You knew how to write a song. You wrote a song. Well, how do you give that song a life? What are the things that you need to do to get your music out there? Because that's like the other half of composition. If you write an amazing thing and you can't get it out there, kind of defeats the purpose. So we got into all these like extra musical things like band leading and writing very clear charts and all this stuff, what to expect of musicians to be able to sight read and what you should kind of stay away from and all these things. And we ended up hanging out for probably 2 or 3 hours, just hanging out. At the end, afterward, I was like, I wish I could share that with everybody. And so that's where the podcast came out from. And then I called him up and said, hey, could we do that again? And I'll record it and make it a podcast. And he was very, very down to do that. And so he was one of the first episodes. The podcast is a long-form interview, usually about an hour or so. And it tends to focus on the Philadelphia scene, but not always. I've been getting more and more New York people in on it, and it also isn't only musicians. I also try to seek out, like I had Willard Jenkins, who's a very great jazz historian and runs the DC Jazz Festival, and I had Lydia Liebman, a really amazing jazz promoter. So I try to interview all people who are just doing things in jazz right now. Kind of my way of documenting jazz history being made, and also hopefully to be used as a resource for other musicians to learn about things that they may not know that much about.
Right on. So tell me, what do you like the best about being a professional musician?
My favorite thing about being a professional musician is the ability of the professional musician to walk into other worlds and subcultures that ordinary people can't. For example, I can play a gig at a billionaire's mansion, and they will talk to me as we're immediately just like equals, because they love music, I love music, we can just talk. We can just talk music, you know? And then that same night, I can play at a divey jazz bar, you know, downtown, and the people there, I can talk to them the same way. It seems to be very free access. Like everybody wants to experience and talk music, and it kind of doesn't matter where you're coming from. Like all those kind of artificial barriers seem to just break down. So that's really my favorite part. And then I would say my second favorite part is that I get to bring things into the world and create and hopefully make some sort of a difference.
Right on. So, what was one of the first live jazz shows you ever saw that made you think, man, that's what I want to do?
I think it was, okay, yeah, I remember now. It was Antonio Sanchez, Pat Metheny, and Christian McBride. They had a trio together for a bit, and I remember just being absolutely blown away by Christian McBride. And he was playing electric bass and upright bass, and it just didn't matter what he was playing. Everything was just absolutely amazing. And that was not too long after I started really getting into jazz, but that kept me wanting to go for sure.
So why do you love jazz?
I really like in general, I like things that require all of your attention. I'm very into rock climbing. My wife and I climb a lot, and both things, both jazz and rock climbing, you have to be fully aware all the time, and you have to be fully in that moment. You start to drift off, you start to phone it in, and then in both situations you can have pretty dire consequences. Your lack of concentration is noticed by everybody, and you're really in it. I also really like the team aspect. Everybody's counting on you to do your job and to interact, and it's very communal, and it is very fun too. I don't want to sound like it's very very serious all the time, which it can be, but it's also very fun when all those things are really going. You're just in this zone where I don't know, I can't really describe it other than you're just like in this zone that it's hard to replicate doing anything else, and you get to share it with some of your best friends, so it's pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. When the live music kicks back in and we're done with this quarantine part of our lives, what do you hope both the musician and the audience member gets from this experience that may be revelatory or enhance how they approach things after this?
Yeah, it's a really great question. First of all, I hope that the jazz clubs are still there. That's kind of a concern of mine. I hope that, and I have no doubt that the music will continue to thrive, and even if all of the infrastructure goes away immediately. But I really hope that the jazz clubs are going to come out of this well, because those are our hubs. That's where we all hang out. That's where we all create the bonds in the community. So I really hope the audience appreciates. I hope both sides. I hope the audience and the musicians really appreciate each other a little bit more, because at the end of the day, we're all in it together. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing again and just seeing everybody. And also, I've been using this time to write a lot, so I have a ton of new material. So I'm really excited to get that out there too, and start playing some of that and start workshopping some of that with real people.
My final question to you is this. Everyone has a version or an interpretation, perception, I should say, of who they think you are, your family, your friends, and your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Wow. I think I'm someone that's just trying to learn something new every day. That's really my goal, is just learn something that I can take forward, something I can just make a little bit better. That's it. That's really it. I just want to do that. If I can do just a little bit every day, then I'm a happy man.
Perfect, man. That was a great way to wrap everything up. Hey, thanks for taking a minute on the fly to talk with me here about this very unique situation in our world, about your music in Philadelphia. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time, man. That's a great service to jazz that you're doing, so thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Philadelphia, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Nicholas for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.